The so-called documentary, which was more of a propaganda video, if you like, in a two-part series, was an absolutely disgraceful piece of shoddy journalism, completely full of innuendo and slurs. It should never have been broadcast by the BBC. You know, the reality was that Narendra Modi, as Chief Minister, had done his best. There's a very small Sikh population which are promoting Khalistan. Well, I don't conflate the two issues at all. I mean, obviously, the so-called documentary, which was more of a propaganda video, if you like, in a two-part series, was an absolutely disgraceful piece of shoddy journalism with an attack on Narendra Modi, both in his time as Chief Minister of Gujarat and then in his time as Prime Minister. Completely full of innuendo and slurs. It should never have been broadcast by the BBC. And of course, because the BBC has a worldwide reputation, people think, oh my goodness, this must be true. But it was produced by an external organisation, overseen by the BBC, and then broadcast as the truth. Well, it's far from the truth. I mean, it dismissed, for a start, it actually didn't look in detail at the causes for the Gujarat riots 20 years ago, and it certainly didn't look at the all-important fact that the Supreme Court had thoroughly investigated all the claims against Narendra Modi, not a shred of evidence to support them. So, you know, the reality was that Narendra Modi, as Chief Minister, had done his best to try and appeal for calm. He looked to additional police resources, not only within Gujarat, but beyond, and eventually had to call in the army to help quell the riots. They showed film of him making appeals for calm and encouraging people to not to riot, yet the slurs that were given were outrageous. And then, of course, put a whole series of different montages together with different people whose I don't know all the people involved, but it was clearly they all had an axe to grind against Narendra Modi.
Some of the people in BBC, or is it the policy of the British government?
Let's be very clear. The BBC is not an arm of the British government. In fact, the BBC is frequently critical of the British government, and actually, to be fair, critical of all British governments there have ever been. That's their job. Their job is to ask questions, to look for evidence. But the key here is you can ask questions, but when there's evidence to the contrary, and it's quite clearly not the case, then you shouldn't be casting aspersions. And I think that's the difference here. Which I think is extremely regrettable, because it would seem as if there was some sort of agenda with the BBC to disrupt UK-India relations, and I think that's a great shame. The issue around the review of the BBC's tax affairs, I understand, is nothing new. This has been going on for quite some time, and obviously there have been discussions between the Inland Revenue here, the income tax authorities here, and the BBC. Obviously, this is a survey where the income tax authorities have looked to gather the evidence to establish if the BBC is doing anything wrong. I would say quite openly, it's the BBC's job in operating within India is to make sure they accord with the rules and regulations, and I'm sure it'll be cleared up very quickly.